I am David, and this is my story. There is a sound a man never forgets, the sound of his own son's name, shouted by soldiers who no longer serve him. I heard it first as a rumor carried up the dusty road to Jerusalem by a breathless messenger whose sandals were nearly torn from his feet. He fell before me in the hall, chest heaving, and I remember the torchlight flickering against the stone walls as he forced out the words. The hearts of the men of Israel are with Absalom. For a moment, I did not understand him. I had ruled this land for decades. I had fought lions with my bare hands as a boy, faced Goliath with a sling and 5 smooth stones, been hunted through the wilderness by Saul like a partridge in the mountains, and been anointed king not once but 3 times. I had built this city. I had brought the Ark of the Covenant into it with dancing and shouting, unashamed before the Lord. And now an old man's messenger stood trembling before me, telling me my own son, my Absalom, the one with hair so thick and dark that men used to weigh it once a year and marvel at its beauty, had turned the heart of Israel against me. I sat very still. Somewhere in the courtyard below, I could hear the ordinary sounds of evening: a servant girl laughing, a donkey braying, the clink of a cooking pot. Life continuing, indifferent, while mine was breaking apart in my chest. I thought of him as a small boy, running through the palace gardens, his laughter echoing off the cedar beams his Uncle Hiram's craftsman had shaped for me. I thought of the day he was born, how I had held him and thanked God for another son, never dreaming that this same child would one day stand at the gates of Hebron for 4 years, quietly, patiently, stealing the hearts of my people one conversation at a time, rising early, standing beside the road, catching every man who came with a grievance before he could reach my judges. Your case is good and right, but there is no man deputed by the king to hear you, he would say, and then, oh, that I were made judge in the land. And when a man would bow to him, Absalom would reach out his hand and kiss him instead, as if he were no prince at all, only a brother among brothers. I had not seen it happening, or perhaps I had not wanted to see it. Was this my punishment? I could not silence the whisper in my own soul. Years before, the prophet Nathan had stood in this very palace and told me, with the flint-hard voice of the Lord himself, that the sword would never depart from my house because of what I had done to Uriah the Hittite, because of what I had done with Bathsheba. Behold, I will raise up evil against you out of your own house. I had wept then, and fasted, and repented in ashes, and God in his mercy had let me live. But mercy is not the erasing of consequence. The seed of that sin had been planted in my own family long ago, and I had watched it grow. Amnon's shame against his sister Tamar, and Absalom's cold, calculated vengeance 2 years later at the sheep-shearing feast, when he had Amnon killed and fled to his mother's people in Geshur. I had mourned Amnon. I had grieved for Absalom too, God forgive me, and after 3 long years of exile, I let Joab bring him home. But I could not bring myself to look upon his face, not for 2 more years. He lived in Jerusalem like a stranger in his own father's house. And by the time I finally called him to me and kissed him, something in him had already hardened past what any embrace could soften. Now I understood. All these years he had never truly returned. He had only been waiting. How many with him? I asked the messenger. The conspiracy is strong, my lord. The people with Absalom are increasing continually. I stood. my knees, which had once carried me over the hills chasing Philistines, felt suddenly like an old man's knees. I looked at the faces of my servants gathered in that hall, men who had followed me since the caves of Adullam, since the wilderness of En-Gedi, and I made the decision that has haunted and humbled me every day since. Arise, and let us flee, for we shall not else escape from Absalom. Make speed to depart, lest he overtake us suddenly, and bring evil upon us, and smite the city with the edge of the sword. I would not let Jerusalem burn for my sake. Not this city, not the city where I had wanted, more than anything else in this world, to build a house for the name of the Lord. We left before the sun was fully up, and I will remember that departure until I draw my last breath. 10 of my concubines stayed behind to keep the house. The rest of the household, wives, children, mighty men, servants, poured out through the gate in a long, ragged column, and the people wept aloud as we passed, a sound like a river of grief moving through the streets. I stood at the edge of the city and watched them all go by me, and then I saw him, Ittai the Gittite, a foreigner, a man of Gath, who had only recently come to serve me, marching at the head of 600 men who had followed him from his own country. Wherefore goest thou also with us? I asked him. Return to thy place and abide with the king, for thou art a stranger and also an exile. Whereas thou camest but yesterday, should I this day make thee go up and down with us, seeing I go I know not whither? Return thou, and take back thy brethren. Mercy and truth be with thee. He would not hear it. He lifted his chin, and there was something fierce and unbroken in his eyes that undid me. As the Lord liveth, and as my Lord the King liveth, surely in what place my Lord the King shall be, whether in death or life, even there also will thy servant be. I could not speak for a moment. A foreigner, a man with no obligation to me at all, more faithful than my own flesh and blood. We crossed the brook Kidron, the water dark and cold around our ankles in the gray morning light, and began climbing the Mount of Olives. I do not know when I began to weep. I only know that somewhere on that slope, with the wind cold against my wet face, I could not stop. I covered my head, a mourner's covering, and went barefoot, the stones bruising the soles of my feet with every step, and I did not care. Let them bruise. Let the ground itself remind me what it is to be brought low. The whole company wept with me, every man with his head covered, climbing that hill weeping as we went. I thought as I walked of the ark of God. My priests, Zadok and Abiathar, had carried it out with us, faithful to the last, and I made them turn back. Carry back the ark of God into the city, I told them. If I shall find favor in the eyes of the Lord, he will bring me again and show me both it and his habitation. But if he thus say, I have no delight in thee, behold, here am I, let him do to me as seemeth good unto him. I meant it. Whatever remained of my pride had been stripped from me on that road. I would not use the ark of the covenant, the very presence of the Most High, as a talisman to secure my throne. If God wanted me back in Jerusalem, he would bring me back. If he did not, then let it be so. Near the top of the mountain where men used to worship, I lifted my hands and I prayed the strangest prayer of my life. Not for victory, not even for safety, but for the undoing of my counselor. Ahithophel, whose wisdom was so renowned that men consulted him as they would consult the very oracle of God, had gone over to Absalom. That wound cut differently than the rest. I knew Ahithophel's counsel would be sound and swift and deadly. "O Lord," I prayed, "I pray thee, turn the counsel of Ahithophel into foolishness." And even as the words left my mouth, my friend Hushai the Archite came to meet me on the summit, his coat torn, earth upon his head, weeping as everyone else was weeping. I looked at him and felt, for the first time that day, something other than sorrow. "If thou passest on with me," I told him, "then thou shalt be a burden unto me. But if thou return to the city, and say unto Absalom, I will be thy servant, O king, then mayest thou for me defeat the counsel of Ahithophel." He understood. He turned and went back down into the city I had just abandoned, back into danger, to serve me by pretending to serve my son. I watched him go and marveled again, betrayal on one side of the scale, and on the other, this quiet, dangerous loyalty. God had not left me without friends. He had simply stripped away every illusion of my own strength so that I could see clearly who they were. Further down the road, Ziba, the servant of Mephibosheth, Jonathan's crippled son, whom I had shown kindness for his father's sake, met me with donkeys loaded with bread and raisins and wine. "Where is thy master's son?" I asked him. "Behold, he abideth at Jerusalem, for he said, Today shall the house of Israel restore me the kingdom of my father." The word struck like a slap. Jonathan's son, Jonathan, who had loved me as his own soul, who had stripped off his own robe and given it to me. His son, it seemed, had turned against me too, hoping to profit from my ruin. I did not know then that Ziba's report was a lie, that Mephibosheth himself had been abandoned and betrayed by his own servant. In my grief, I believed it, and I gave Ziba all that had belonged to his master. I would learn the truth later, too late to undo the wrong I had done in my haste and my sorrow. Even in exile, even weeping, a king can still misjudge. Even brokenness does not make a man infallible. I have had to make my peace with that too. Then came Bahurim, and a man of the house of Saul named Shimei, who came out along the ridge above the road, cursing me and flinging stones and dust as I passed below. Come out, thou bloody man, and thou man of Belial. The Lord hath returned upon thee all the blood of the house of Saul. And behold, thou art taken in thy mischief, because thou art a bloody man." Abishai, son of my sister Zeruiah, drew his sword. "Why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Let me go over, I pray thee, and take off his head." But something in me had gone very still and very quiet, the way the sea grows quiet before a great wind passes. "Let him curse," I said, "because the Lord hath said unto him, Curse David. Who shall then say, Wherefore hast thou done so? It may be that the Lord will look on mine affliction, and that the Lord will requite me good for his cursing this day." I meant that too. I did not know if the man's words were cruelty or a strange, sharp mercy from the hand of God, stripping the last of my pride away stone by stone, curse by curse, until nothing was left in me but a naked dependence on the God who had chosen a shepherd boy from Bethlehem and could, if he wished, unchoose him just as easily. I had sinned greatly. Perhaps this was the shadow of that sin still passing over me. And yet, even in the ash of that thought, something in my spirit would not let go of hope. I had known this God since I was a boy watching sheep beneath the stars. I knew his anger, but I knew his mercy far better. We came at last to the Jordan, weary, mourning, and there my mighty men gathered around me, Joab, Abishai, the officers of my scattered kingdom, and I began, slowly, painfully, to number what remained. Word came that Ahithophel, seeing his counsel rejected in favor of Hushai's, had gone home, set his affairs in order, and hanged himself. I felt no triumph in hearing it, only a kind of sorrowful awe at the God who answers a desperate prayer, prayed on a hillside in the gray light of a terrible morning. The armies gathered for what I now understood was coming. My own son's forces against mine, brother rising against father. The sword Nathan had promised finally unsheathed in my own house. I organized the men into 3 companies under Joab, Abishai, and Ittai, the faithful foreigner who had refused to leave my side. And when they were ready to march out to the field, I stood at the gate, and every soldier who passed by me could see plainly that their king was not thinking of victory. I called Joab and Abishai and Ittai to me one last time before they went out, and I do not know if my voice trembled when I spoke, but I know my heart did. Deal gently for my sake with the young man, even with Absalom. That is what I said, not defeat him, not bring him to justice, only that deal gently for my sake with the young man. All the people heard the king give that charge to his captains concerning Absalom. I saw something pass over Joab's face that I did not have the strength, that day, to name. I sat down then, in the space between the 2 gates, to wait, a father, a king, a man who had done wrong and lost so much, waiting to hear what would become of his son on the far side of the forest of Ephraim. Whatever came next, I had said what was truest in my heart. I had not stopped loving him, even now, even after everything. I do not think a father's love ever fully lets go, however deep the wound, however far the child has run. If you have been blessed by this story, subscribe, like, and share it with a friend.